Most Worshipful Grand Master, past Grand Masters, members and brethren of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons in Arizona, distinguished guests, friends and family. Freemasons have long been students of history. Indeed, research and discovery are a celebrated pursuit amongst the brotherhood. So much so that the word light has become synonymous with the word knowledge in our craft. Our love affair with history often leads us back to the founding of our country. From George Washington and James Madison to Theodore Roosevelt and Harry Truman, we celebrate the fact that 14 presidents of the United States have been Freemasons. One Masonic president, Warren Harding, played a pivotal role in the creation of an important monument at Arlington National Cemetery. Thus, it was appropriate that our Masonic year began with the Grand Master's trip to Washington, D.C., and our immersion in the history of the United States. On the most American of days, July 4th, 2019, a Masonic contingent from Arizona set out on a pilgrimage to the Arlington National Cemetery in Virginia, just across the Potomac from Washington, D.C. In a humbling and solemn ceremony, the Grand Master, accompanied by soldiers, lay a wreath on the tomb of the unknown soldier. This tomb, an iconic marble sarcophagus, depicts 3 carved Greek figures representing peace, victory, and valor. It was here at this tomb in 1921 when Mason and President Warren Harding presided over the ceremony that laid to rest the body of an unidentified American soldier from World War I in the plaza of Arlington National Cemetery's Memorial Amphitheater. Since midnight on July 2, 1937, sentinels of the 3rd U.S. Infantry have maintained a 24-hour constant vigil over the tomb regardless of the weather conditions. This post is considered an honor and is dedicated to the services of those who have died in war defending the ideals of our country. The following day, we opened Grand Lodge at the George Washington Masonic National Memorial, celebrating our first president and most famous Mason, George Washington. We traveled to other historic sites, such as the Lincoln Memorial and the World War II Memorial, Mount Vernon and the House of the Temple. At each stop, we learned valuable lessons in the history of our country. We learned about the battles and sacrifices made on our behalf. We heard stories of those events and individuals that helped form this great nation. Little did we know that these celebrations early in our Masonic year would be followed by unforeseen challenges. That is when on March 13th, 2020, the President declared a national emergency related to the global COVID-19 outbreak. Shortly after, the Grand Master would issue his first of many communications governing Freemasonry in Arizona. Freemasonry has faced many challenges throughout its history. One such challenge, just over 100 years ago, was the flu pandemic of 1918. At our annual communication in 1919, Grand Master Edwin A. Hughes was unable to be president due to a severe case of influenza. The 1918 flu pandemic was the most severe pandemic of its time, caused by the H1N1 virus. It is estimated that 500 million people, or 1/3 of the world's population, became infected. Perhaps this is one reason why, in 2020, our society reacted so strongly to a pandemic threat. After the declaration of a national emergency, executive orders by the governor and edicts by the Grand Master changed the way we lived, the way we worked, and the way we practiced Masonry in Arizona. Then in late May, when it seemed like things would go back to normal, civil rights came to the forefront, civil unrest took front stage, and led to rioting and imposed curfews. Once again, we found ourselves traveling down an unfamiliar path. We were caused to question many of the freedoms we previously celebrated. Our freedom to gather in lodges or in protest, our freedom to travel, our freedom to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Each of us had to ask ourselves, how do we stay true to the ideals of our craft, our country, and our God, when oftentimes it feels like we are being asked to do just the opposite, all whilst our brother might be standing on the opposite side. In 1776, when that famous document, the Declaration of Independence, was written, 9 of the 56 signers were Freemasons. Among the declarations made, the most famous and well-known is the following: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Each of us has likely quoted these words when we have felt our freedoms infringed in this country. But seldom do we hear those final words of that same document. And so for support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and sacred honor. These men who were challenging their own government, challenging the status quo, were ready to put everything they had on the line. These ideals are ones that, as Freemasons, we are familiar with. The signers declared that they relied on divine providence, as we Freemasons pledge deference to that great architect of the universe. They pledged their lives to each other as we pledge a commitment to the tenet of brotherly love. They pledged their fortunes much as we pledge a commitment to Masonic charity. And they pledged their sacred honor to one another as we make a promise to aid, support, and protect each other and regard the whole human species as one family. The battles fought by the founders of our country nearly 250 years ago are not gone, but merely changed. Challenges to our freedom come in many different shapes: tyranny and polity, taxation and limitation. But we are a country built on challenging the status quo. We fight for individual rights and state rights. We challenge taxation and spending, limitations of our freedoms and interpretations of our laws. But the fight has always been amongst us, among Americans. We argue with honor to bring what is best for the world to this table in the United States. We fight to bring those 1,000 points of light to shine brightly before the whole world as an example for how best to live. What we have seen is that now, more than ever, we must remain true to the ideals of our country and our brotherhood. Our Masonic Constitution in Arizona calls for us to pledge our support to our form of government in combating any enemy within or without our borders who would destroy our basic principles of a free country. It also tells us that we are limited only by a strict adherence to the ancient landmarks of the order, which, among other things, calls for the equality of all Masons. The issues facing our country today call out for Masons of good character to be men of action. As our Grand Master has said, we must get back to the basics. Upon entering the craft, you are charged to be exemplary in the discharge of your civil duties and to let justice be the guide of all your actions. You are secondly charged to display the discretion, the virtue, and the dignity which become a worthy and exemplary Mason, and reminded that you are bound by the strongest ties of fidelity and honor. Finally, we are charged with duty and honor alike, and are admonished to practice universal benevolence. The freedoms that this country was founded on are more relevant now than ever before. It is not the task of Freemasonry to direct you down any particular path or endorse any one specific creed, but to remind you that in everything we do, we must be Masons. We must practice honor. Go forward into the world, brethren. Be faithful, be true, be just. Bring the light of Freemasonry into the world and be the example of honor that so many need in these times of turmoil.